you with me, Kouri Richins, to share her 3 C's to helping kids cope with grief. And Kouri, I want to start with your story. What happened in your personal life?
So my husband passed away unexpectedly last year. So it's March 4th was a 1-year anniversary for us, and he was 39. It completely took us all by shock. And we have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And you know, my kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced last year, and you know, hoping that it can kind of help other kids, you know, deal with this and kind of, you know, find happiness some way or another.
So you actually wrote this book with your children.
I did.
And it's only been a year. How did you process and say you go from processing death to I need to write a book and help others?
Just 1 year after the sudden and shocking death of her 39-year-old husband, Kouri Richins decided to muster up the emotional strength to write a children's book to help her and her 3 young sons cope with the devastating loss of their beloved father. As if the shock of Eric's sudden death weren't enough, an autopsy report would reveal that his death was not from natural causes. Now, just over a year after Eric's death, much more information has risen to the surface, revealing that there is much more to this bizarre story than meets the eye. Hey friends, I hope you're all happy and healthy and having the greatest day today. My name is Tara, and this is my channel, True Crime Matters, where we talk about and analyze everything true crime. If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe. It's just a free and easy way to help support the new channel, and I'd be so super grateful for that. I also wanted to mention that we have just started a TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, so please feel free to like and follow us on those platforms as well to show your support. I'll link them all down below. Now, today I'm going to take some time to talk about a case that has been reported on all over the place. It actually came as a request. So I'm going to take some time to talk about the case of Kouri and Eric Richins. Utah, an absolutely gorgeous state tucked into the western section of the U.S., known for its stunning mountains, high plateaus, and deserts. It's also famous for its large Mormon community and the world-famous Sundance Film Festival, amongst other things. In May of 1982, in Bountiful, Utah, Eric Eugene was born to the Richins family, which was apparently one of Summit County's most distinguished families. In fact, there's even some buildings named after the family that are still standing today. Growing up, Eric helped out on his father's ranch with chores like transporting hay, caring for the animals, and fixing fences. Eric was always a sportsman, too. He began playing basketball, baseball, and soccer when he was just a child. In fact, when he later became a father, Eric would also coach his son's teams, and he was an outdoorsman. Because of his upbringing on his father's ranch, he loved always being in nature, being outdoors, and loved to go hunting as well. Eric attended Woods Cross High School. Now, Eric was a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and like many young Mormon males after high school, Eric served on a 2-year mission trip to Mexico City, where he learned to speak fluent Spanish. After his mission, Eric married a young woman named Julie Jorgensen in 2005. However, that marriage did not last long, as the couple divorced in 2009. It's been said that around this time of his divorce from Julie, Eric had also founded a masonry firm in 2009 named C&E Stone Masonry, with a business partner and close friend named Kouri Richins. The letters in the company name matched to their own initials, C&E. The company specialized in elaborate exterior stonework and tile work in upscale residences. It's also been reported that Richins and Wright bought a joint life insurance policy on one another. Apparently, this is fairly common when two people start a firm together because it helps one buy the other party out in the case their business partner dies. Sadly, in 2011, Eric's ex-wife suddenly died tragically at the age of 26 in a fiery crash. Apparently, her car was struck from behind while stopped at a red light by a pickup truck with a driver impaired by his frost-covered windshield. Despite all of this devastation in his life, Eric would soon graduate from the University of Utah later into 2011. Now, Kouri Darden, who would become Kouri Richins, was also born in Utah, specifically Heber City, in 1990 to parents Elisa and Ronald Darden. Not much is really known about her childhood at the moment, but it has been reported that it appears Kouri may have grown up predominantly with her mom, as her dad lived in North Carolina and appeared to have several charges related to public intoxication. Kouri's LinkedIn profile states that she graduated from Weber State University with a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration, and then later graduated from Utah State University with a master's in human resources. And much like Eric Richins, Kouri also started her own business pretty young, which was a housekeeping business called Kouri Darden Housekeeping. Kouri also had experience working as an inpatient services specialist at Park City Medical Center. Now, one other job that Kouri had was working at the local Home Depot. While working at Home Depot, Kouri developed a relationship with a co-worker there named Linda King. Now, Linda was an employee at Home Depot for quite some time, so she knew of a young man who came in all the time named Eric Richins. Linda said that Eric would come in all the time for supplies he had needed for his masonry business. Linda had said that Eric was this super sweet and patient guy and would stand around waiting quietly for his supplies and sort of joke around with the employees as he waited. Just extra nice guy compared to the other people that would get impatient waiting for their items.
He was just the sweetest guy. He'd always say, "Oh yeah, I'm trying to get you a boyfriend, Linda," but then I'd, go, "Well, I have to do this, look like," he goes, "You're too particular," and it would always crack him up, but it was just sweet. The contractors, there's some rough and tumble guys that come in and they want their stuff right away and they get mad, it's like, "Oh, it's not here in 5 minutes," they start getting mad. Sometimes Eric would have to wait an hour. He wouldn't get mad. He'd just crack up or walk around and talk to people, and I never ever saw him mad, ever.
And Linda also knew some of Eric's co-workers who worked at his contractor business. And Linda said many of them would note to Linda how Eric was really attracted to the new checkout girl named Kouri.
Kouri and I were the contractor checkout girls there for all the contractors coming in, and Eric was a very frequent customer that came in all the time, and he would come in my line all the time because, I was like the mom to all the guys, and he'd kind of look over at Kouri, and I was like, "Oh," and he just kind of looked over, and I says, "Go over there and check out with her," so they did. Anyway, they ended up having a date, and everybody was cracking up, "Oh, he finally did it," and it was just so cute, and they finally went out.
This coworker, Julie, sort of nudged them together because she could tell they both kind of liked each other. And after that, well, that was it. The pair was pretty much inseparable. They started dating and were with each other all the time. Now, remember, Eric had been through a lot with his ex-wife before, between the divorce and her sudden unexpected death. And understandably, the divorce was hard on Eric, financially as well as emotionally. So he had really spent a long time being single and was very cautious about who he dated. But when he met Kouri, he was just so completely smitten with her that when she said yes to a date, he felt like he was ready to go all in on this relationship. And by all accounts, this seemed like a great pairing, and the couple had almost a fairy tale-like relationship from the start. Eric and Kouri would soon get engaged, and their wedding date was set for June 15th, 2013. Now, this is where I feel things start to go a little sideways in this story. On the eve of their wedding day, either Eric's mother or Eric's sister suddenly presented Kouri with a prenup agreement. I had heard in one place it was his mother, in another place I read it was his sister, but regardless, Eric's family would later say they were just trying to protect Eric and prevent a repeat of the difficulties of his previous divorce. Plus, Eric's portion of his business, the C&E masonry business, at the time was now worth $2.5 million. Now, when I first heard this detail, it immediately struck me as kind of odd for a few reasons, but why didn't Eric just speak to Kouri himself about wanting a prenup? In other words, why was his mother or sister interjecting themselves into Eric's financial and marital decisions with this woman that's supposed to be the closest person to him in the world now? I mean, obviously, I understand he was super close with his mom and his sisters and they were trying to protect him. I get that, which, that's a pretty sweet gesture. But even still, it struck me as odd that someone else was speaking on behalf of him. Then my next thought was, well, maybe Eric had a hard time being assertive and speaking candidly with Kouri about things. And after all, if you remember the story about Home Depot, the employee Linda did make it sound that maybe Eric was sort of a soft-spoken guy and may have a hard time speaking up with women, because she had said it took him a pretty long time to approach Kouri in Home Depot and ask her out to begin with. But basically, my general thought about the whole ordeal was somebody that has a hard time speaking up to their partner may indicate that they are just generally an extremely sensitive person, or they had extremely controlling guardians. Remember that detail for later when we talk about controlling and abusive relationships. Now, back to the prenup. It basically stated that neither Eric nor Kouri would have any rights to present or future income or assets should they divorce, except if one of them passed away before the other one while they were still married. Also, around the time of the wedding, Eric added Kouri alongside his business partner Cody as beneficiaries of his life insurance policies so that Cody could use his share of the payoff in the event of his death to buy Eric's share in the company. After the marriage, their lives truly took off and bloomed. The couple welcomed their very first child almost immediately. Their eldest son is now 10 years old. And although Kouri was a new mom, that was not slowing down her aspirations. No. Kouri would no longer be a checkout girl at Home Depot. Instead, she became a realtor and even started her own real estate company. Kouri began working in the luxury market and even began purchasing a few properties herself. Kouri was really getting into house flipping, where you buy properties for cheap, fix them up, and then sell them for a higher price. By the second year of their marriage, Kouri and Eric would welcome a second son, now aged 9. At this point in their marriage, even though Kouri had her own real estate business, Eric was still the family's main source of income. Now, from the outside, the Richins appeared to enjoy, quote, the perfect little life, end quote, according to an old acquaintance of Eric's, who had known him for approximately 20 years. Eric was described as a devoted and attentive father who, despite his hard work and long hours, valued his family time more than anything. Eric was said to find time to help coach all of his son's sports teams and loved going on adventures with his family. However, 3 years into the marriage, their seemingly perfect family started to fall apart due to financial difficulties, which would later reveal a relationship riddled with poor money management, mistrust, and secrecy. In fact, it's recently been alleged that around this time, between 2015 and 2017, Kouri had secretly obtained 4 separate life insurance policies on Eric without his knowledge, with a combined potential payout of $2 million. Now, despite their financial squabbles, the couple maintained their relationship and even welcomed a third son, now age 6. However, in 2020, Eric began telling other people closest to him that he thought his wife was acting very strange. And something kind of bizarre and highly significant would allegedly happen on a romantic getaway with Kouri that would make Eric believe that his wife may be an entirely different person than he had thought. In order to ease some of the relationship troubles, the couple decided to go on a trip to Greece together. It's not clear whether it was Kouri's idea or Eric's idea to go to Greece. However, one night, Eric suddenly told his sister that Kouri had made him a drink, and pretty much immediately after he had the drink, he became violently ill. Now, interestingly, instead of him assuming maybe he had a stomach bug or maybe something he ate in Greece didn't agree with him, not only did his mind immediately go to, my wife did something to the drink she made me, but he actually had such a bad feeling about it that he immediately told a family member. I mean, that to me speaks volumes. If this discussion with his sister actually did take place, I find that highly significant in this case. Now, pretty immediately after Eric got home from Greece, he began to make some other awfully worrisome discoveries about his wife. In September of 2020, Eric allegedly found out that Kouri had somehow obtained and spent a $250,000 home equity line of credit on their family home without his knowledge, had withdrawn about $100,000 from his bank accounts, and had racked up about $30,000 in credit card debt on a credit card with his name. Additionally, it is believed that Eric also discovered that Kouri had misappropriated over $134,000 from Eric's business funds, which were intended for tax payments. It has been reported that Eric actually did confront Kouri about all of this stolen money, and she did pledge to pay him back. However, after discovering all of this financial deceit, Eric began to secretly seek out advice from divorce attorneys and do some new estate planning. Eric created a new living trust in November of 2020, and he kept that fact from his wife entirely. He then transferred the marital home, his personal property, and his share of the masonry business into the trust. He placed his sister Katie in control of the trust in case he were to pass away. He also made his sister the beneficiary of his $500,000 life insurance policy. It was said that Eric specifically did all of this to protect assets for his children. Now, 2 more years would go by and the couple would have random squabbles, but for the most part, nothing quite as significant as what would come in 2022. Now, this is when things really go sideways. According to a warrant, in January of 2022, Eric's business partner Cody noticed a random notification that came from their insurance company informing him that Kouri had logged into their joint insurance account, removing them as co-beneficiaries and appointing herself as the sole beneficiary. Luckily, since Cody and Eric were paying attention, they were able to just quickly reinstate the policy how it was. However, at this point now, they both felt like they could not trust Kouri whatsoever. So it was at this point they completely removed Kouri from that policy. It's been recently discovered, however, that soon after that plan with the insurance company failed, just a few weeks later, Kouri allegedly started a new application for a $100,000 life insurance policy on Eric. Now, we do know that Eric was apparently aware of the over $500,000 that his wife had basically stolen from him, which he had confronted her about, and she promised to reimburse him. But it is believed that he did not know that his wife was allegedly burdened by a multi-million-dollar debt. Kouri reportedly owes at least $1.8 million to a hard money lender, nearly $200,000 to the IRS in back taxes, and of course, the $514,346 she took from Eric, which he had already confronted her about. It was around this time that Kouri began mentioning to Eric that she had strong interest in flipping a huge mansion. The enormous 20,000 square foot home was built on 9 acres, and while the mansion was still unfinished, it was incredibly regal, with a gorgeous view. In fact, some people thought that maybe the house was a little bit too much, a bit of an eyesore. Nevertheless, it is alleged that Kouri began looking at flipping this house as the perfect solution to all of her financial problems. However, the only problem that Kouri had was the price tag, $2 million. And her husband, Eric, well, he really wasn't into the whole idea. Eric believed that the house was way too expensive and far too risky of an investment. It has been said that this financial argument, though, over this specific property was a huge part of what set their entire relationship into a tailspin. From Kouri's perspective, Eric was minimizing her freedom by not allowing her to make this financial decision, while Eric again felt that it was just way too big of a financial risk, and he was already burdened by the $500,000 debt that she owed him. Now, right around in this time in early 2022, it's been said that Kouri allegedly began speaking with an acquaintance about obtaining substances for an investor with back problems. She said she would leave some money at one of the houses she was flipping, and this acquaintance would then drop off the requested substances for Kouri to pick up and then pick up the money there. Soon afterwards, Kouri began asking this same substance acquaintance for something a little stronger, specifically, quote, that Michael Jackson stuff, end quote. She later specified that she was looking for the street substance Fent, and I have to abbreviate the real word because of YouTube. Kouri then allegedly spent about $900 on about 15 to 30 pills of Fent from this substance acquaintance. Now, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2022, Eric found an unexpected Valentine's Day surprise on the seat of his truck. There was a love letter from his wife alongside a fresh sandwich that she had made for him. Eric began eating this Valentine's sandwich. However, after the very first bite, Eric immediately began having major difficulties breathing and started to develop hives everywhere. Now, Eric had EpiPens with him because apparently one of their sons has an allergy. Eric told one of his friends that he administered the EpiPen and immediately passed out afterwards. And when he came to, he told this friend, Cody, his business partner, that he had gotten ill from this Valentine's Day sandwich and referenced the similarities between the sandwich that Kouri had just made him, and then he was kind of having a flashback to the drink from Greece a few months prior. So last time he had called his sister to report the incident, but this time he told his best friend and business partner Cody that he truly felt like Kouri was trying to kill him for money. It was also this incident and around this same time that Eric reportedly told his family that, quote, "If anything happens to me, Kouri is to blame." On February 26th, Kouri allegedly texted her substance acquaintance again, asking for another 15 to 30 fent pills. Now, just days later, it has been said that Eric and Kouri actually did put in an offer on that $2 million mansion that they were disagreeing about. So they were technically under contract, but most of us who have bought homes know that being under contract is definitely not a final sale when you put in an offer. In fact, it has been reported that Eric mentioned to his family that he was going to break to Kouri that they were not finalizing the sale of that mansion. Even though Kouri had initially convinced Eric to become a co-borrower, it's now being suggested that Eric's family says he was absolutely convinced the property was a bad deal, and he named it a white elephant, or a property requiring much care and expense and yielding little profit. It's not really known whether Eric actually did confront Kouri with the fact that he would not be going through with the deal or not. However, allegedly, there is evidence that Kouri had several other conversations just before the closing on the house. On March 3rd, 2022, less than 2 days before the mansion deal was scheduled to close, Kouri reached out to the hard money lender to whom she owed $1.8 million, and she reached out to the IRS. Now, Kouri says, on the night of March 4th, which was just 1 day before the scheduled closing of that mansion, her and Eric were in celebration mode as they were excited about the upcoming closing. Around 9 p.m. that night, she made Eric a Moscow Mule celebratory cocktail, which she says he sipped as he relaxed in bed and scrolled through his phone. She also said he took a THC gummy at that same time. Soon after she brought him his drink, however, Kouri stated that one of her sons called out because he was having a night terror. So, Kouri says she immediately went into her son's room to help him fall back asleep, and in doing so, she fell asleep alongside him in the room. Then, Kouri said at about 3 a.m., she woke up from her son's bed and went back into the master bedroom where Eric was sleeping. Kouri stated that it was when she got back into the bed with her husband, she noticed that he was cold to the touch and unresponsive. Kouri said she immediately called 911 and began CPR at the instruction of the 911 operator. But sadly, it was too late. By the time the EMS arrived, they pronounced Eric dead at the scene. Now, friends and family were just absolutely shocked and baffled because Eric was such a young, vibrant, and healthy young man. However, Eric's family and best friend Cody, they were pretty much suspicious of Kouri right away, given that they had already heard so many allegations from Eric regarding his own suspicions of Kouri. Toxicology tests and an autopsy were ordered immediately in the hopes that they could figure out what had caused such a young, healthy man to die so suddenly. Meanwhile, literally hours after her husband's death, Kouri went ahead and closed on the sale of that $2 million mansion. Allegedly, Kouri even hosted a large party to drink and celebrate the purchase of the mansion the very same day her husband unexpectedly passed away. Now, at this gathering, it was said that Eric's sister Katie was present, and after Kouri asked her to leave so she could be alone to grieve, Katie absolutely lost her cool. Katie began yelling at Kouri that she would be sure to kick Kouri out of the family home, which at the time, Kouri didn't take very seriously. But Katie would continue to taunt Kouri, informing her that her husband Eric had transferred all of his assets, the family house, and the masonry company to a trust to Katie, naming her as the trustee instead of Kouri. Kouri would soon also discover that she had been removed from Eric's will and substituted as the beneficiary of his life insurance policy by his sister as well, leaving her with pretty much nothing. Shocked and enraged by this news, Kouri began physically assaulting her sister-in-law, and actually the police had to be called to the home, and the assault later resulted in an assault charge for Kouri, to which she pled no contest. So after all of this happened, it was in complete desperation that Kouri wound up hiring a locksmith to try and break into Eric's safe, which she knew had about $160,000 worth of cash in it. And just 2 weeks after Eric passed away, Kouri listed that mansion again for $4.8 million. Pretty soon after Kouri listed the house for sale, the toxicology and autopsy reports on Eric were ready. And it was clear from those reports that Eric died as a consequence of a fent overdose. And not only that, the quantity of fent in his system was so high that it was around 5 times the lethal dose. The toxicology report revealed that it wasn't the medical-grade fent, but instead the illegal street version of fent. The medical examiner had further been able to determine that Eric had swallowed the fent via mouth based on an examination of stomach acid. And looking back now, a probable cause statement tells a much different story than the one Kouri had told police about the night that Eric died. The statement reads that the EMS personnel arrived to the Richins home on Willow Court at 3:30 a.m. on a complaint of an unresponsive male. They discovered Eric on the floor at the foot of his bed when they arrived. One of the paramedics immediately recommended that police be called, since the circumstances appeared suspicious. According to an affidavit, Kouri alleged that she did perform CPR on her husband. However, when medics arrived to perform CPR, a considerable amount of blood immediately came out of Eric's mouth, yet they found absolutely no blood on Kouri. The medics stated that based off that evidence, they did not believe that she had actually performed CPR like she said she had. So, armed with this proof and more, investigators moved quickly, obtaining a search warrant for the Richins residence. They confiscated phones, laptops, and any other objects that may hold evidence. And in the past year, the police have been quietly conducting their investigation into Eric's death. Another part of Kouri's story that was not adding up with police is that on this night of Eric's death, Kouri told investigators that she had left her phone plugged in at their bedside when she went in to go help her son get back to sleep. However, investigators discovered that Kouri was actually having a text message exchange or conversation with someone, which she immediately deleted. Investigators were able to track movement on her phone as well during that time that she claimed she was fast asleep next to her son. Now, police were actually able to retrieve much of that deleted conversation, and in doing so, they uncovered that the very same person whom Kouri was conversing with the night of Eric's death was the same substance acquaintance person who sold her the illegal fent. Now, police had asked Kouri during the investigation if her husband had ever had an issue with drugs, and Kouri replied that yes. Eric did have a pain pill addiction when he was in high school, but she wasn't aware of anything currently. That said, Eric's family has completely denied any allegations that Eric ever had any sort of pain pill addiction. They claim that Eric never took illegal substances and he barely even drank. Kouri has now filed a lawsuit against her husband and his sister, alleging that Eric misled her and that he had no authority to transfer her part of his assets without her knowledge, as stipulated in the prenup. So essentially, she's fighting for the rights to his fortune, since the prenup stipulates that it goes to her if Eric dies before her. She's also suing his sister for $300,000 in legal expenses. Katie, Eric's sister, has countersued Kouri, citing an inquiry into her brother's mysterious death and claiming that the police were examining it as a possible murder. Meanwhile, despite all of this turmoil going on with her in-laws, Kouri would maintain that she was innocent. And being as she was somewhat broke, Kouri decided what better time to publish a children's book about the death of a parent. She says to help herself and her children cope with the sudden death of their father. Kouri was seen on local television doing interviews publicizing the book she wrote entitled, Are You With Me?
I've done, I'm new to all of this, so kind of doing, research and reading books and things to try and understand, not only how to grieve as a widow, as a wife, but also, with my kids, how to help them understand what just happened. And what I have kind of found is, as I mentioned, it's kind of the 3 C's is how I visualize it, and it's, connection, continuity, and care. And it's, making sure connection is the major one, and making sure that their spirit is always alive in your home, and memories are always brought up, and doing things that your loved ones love to do, whether it's riding bikes or their favorite dinner, and just constantly, talking about them.
And Kouri, do you mention at dinner, here's Dad, or Dad would like this meal, or Dad would, let's bring Dad on a bike ride?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, explaining to my kids, just because he's not present here with us physically, that doesn't mean his presence isn't here with us, and he's doing these things with us. And he's, here for birthdays, and he's here for Christmas, and, and it's just comforting to them to know that, they're not living this life alone. Like, Dad is still here, it's just in a different way, a different version.
Well, I opened up your book, and one of the first pages I saw is a little boy. It looks like he's standing in a hallway at school, and he's saying, "Are you still here?"
Yes, yeah, and it's, and that was like the first day of school, and, all the nerves that kids face on the first day of school with new, and just hoping, Dad, like, walk with me, like, help me get through today, like, give me the strength to do that. And it has found, it's been a lot of peace for my kids to, to really remember that in the back of their head, that they're never alone, so.
So you actually wrote this book with your children.
I did.
And it's only been a year. How did you process and say go from processing death to, I need to write a book and help others?
I just watched the struggle that my kids were going through, and I actually, I went on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and trying to find something that we could use to cope at nights. Nights are the hardest, it seems like, for everybody when, dealing with anything, but I just wanted some story to read to my kids at night, and I just could not find anything. I couldn't find anything that really, suited them or helped them find comfort and peace, and so, I was like, let's just write one. And so, I took things that my kids have said to me this last year, and we kind of articulated it and put it into a story, and, just have hopes that it will help other kids.
But despite all of this, for the past year, police have quietly maintained their investigation. And finally, on May 8th, 2023, they believed they had enough evidence to arrest Kouri. Kouri was arrested and charged with felony first-degree murder of her husband, Eric, 3 counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, and possession of GHB.
We do begin with a community in shock. News broke of a mother charged with murder.
ABC4's Elena Castro has been covering this story throughout the evening for us. She's live in Summit County tonight with the very latest. Elena.
A community is shocked tonight after news broke earlier today of what seemed like a grieving wife and mother now arrested for the murder of her husband. Kouri and Eric Richins were married for 9 years before his death last March. And just a month ago, Kouri came onto ABC4's lifestyle show to promote the book about grief and loss after the loss of her husband. According to unsealed court documents, autopsy reports revealed Eric died due to an overdose of fentanyl, 5 times the lethal dose, and it is believed his wife put it in a drink she gave him at home. Reports also saying that Eric was suspicious of being poisoned and confided in a friend that he suspected his wife of poisoning him. Kouri has now been booked into the Summit County Jail, and during her first court appearance today, the judge denied her release. Neighbors now saying they are stunned at this outcome and that the Richins were always a friendly couple.
any inkling at all that what she was saying was not legitimate, that she wasn't actually grieving?
Right, so Ashley Banfield asked that question, did you have any spidey senses? And of course, when you look back after the fact, you're like, well, I wonder if that was interesting. And she didn't show emotion, right? We have so many people who grieve in different ways, they process differently, and who are we to say that's the wrong way to process, right? So for me, it was someone who was sharing their story, sharing a tool to possibly help other kids, but we didn't know. I mean, she didn't have any emotion.
There'd be no reason you would suspect anything different at that point.
No, I had no spidey senses. And I agree, people show and express in different ways. And that's not the first guest we've had sit down and talk about something that's hard or painful or loss. And some people get misty-eyed. Some people come in a little more prepared for it and they can power through and be composed. I did clock that she wasn't necessarily emotional, but I thought, okay, well, it's been a year. Maybe she's just prepared to speak about it. And I did think that it was an interesting choice, what she wore on the air. She was all bundled up in her jacket. Her hair wasn't quite brushed. And I thought, she's still going through it. She's grieving. She's not quite together. So it's expressing it in maybe that way. She's not quite pulled together. But I don't know. Now I have so many questions.
Now you're
do.
going back. Now
Yes.
you're rethinking what you thought.
And we're thinking, why
weeks
did
ago.
she come on? And was she pretending? And was that a great
And
actress?
she did contact us.
Right.
She did
we
reach
did not
out to
approach
us
her. She actually
ask to be
wrote
on the
into
show.
the station saying, can I promote my book?
Now eerie to see this couch and that video being aired across the country on stations everywhere and national television, because that is the video that they're all asking for and they're using, because it is so shocking that she came on local television just 3 weeks before her arrest.
Yeah.
There has been some speculation that perhaps Kouri was actually also cheating on Eric, maybe with this person she was texting the night her husband died. Eric's family has actually also insinuated that Kouri had a boyfriend throughout her entire marriage to Eric. There has also been rumblings that Kouri actually had some online activity in her Pinterest account, which showed fairly recently a vision board for wedding lingerie. So the question is, why was she looking at bridal lingerie? Was she planning on getting married so soon? Now, Kouri's side of the story is that Eric must have had some secret pill addiction, much like she alleges that he had in high school. Kouri maintains that Eric must have overdosed on Fent by accident the night that he passed away, and she has absolutely nothing to do with his death, and it's all just a big misunderstanding. Now, as for the new details in this case, because of the massive media interest in the case, prosecutors filed a motion on May 31st, 2023, asking the court to issue a gag order. In the motion, prosecutors actually cited the gag order issued in the University of Idaho case with Brian Kohberger. That gag order in Kohberger's case actually forbids any party associated with the case from speaking to the media. So, because prosecutors filed that motion on May 31st, Kouri was requested back in court on Friday, June 2nd for a hearing. In the hearing, the state requested that attorneys, witnesses, law enforcement, and the victim's family be restrained from making any sort of public statements about the case. However, the defense attorney for Kouri, Sky Lazaro, said the timing of the gag order would unfairly prevent Kouri from defending herself publicly. And she said, quote, "It actually does taint the jury pool, because then the only narrative out there is what's been filed in the information and nothing else," end quote. And I agree there. I mean, Kouri should be allowed to speak to the media and make her own statements, although she'd better be careful, though, of course, because as we all know, anything she says can actually be used against her at trial. Anyway, that said, in the gag order hearing on Friday, June 2nd, the judge actually did not give prosecutors the full gag order they wanted. Instead, he said there will now be some restrictions on speaking publicly. The judge cited the First Amendment, saying he wasn't sure he had the jurisdiction to hold in contempt people not directly involved in court proceedings. Kouri Richins is due back in court June 12th for her detention hearing. Now, this case is just so sad, and As I pieced it all together, I had to actually look at all the evidence and look at all of Kouri's accomplishments or blessings alongside each other. They're pretty large ones too that many people never attain in their whole lives. Starting her own businesses, closing on a massive mansion, writing a book, having a wonderful husband, and most of all, her 3 beautiful boys. Now those businesses are gone. That mansion is completely abandoned. Her book is an embarrassment. Her life partner is destroyed and gone. And their 3 beautiful children, stripped of their home, their friends, their parents, and now their own identity is shaken. And if all of these allegations against Kouri are true, all of those blessings are now left hollow and bare in the wake of her own apparent addiction to greed and control. I personally think that the house flipping also had an addictive element tied to it as well. Now, as I wrap up this story, I just wanted to add my own thoughts on this case. And of course, you can turn this video off if you're not interested at all in my thoughts, but I really do think that talking about this is important because there are so many red flags in this case here, and I think it would be useful for all of us to see and understand what those red flags were in order to help our own loved ones. Some of you may already know that when I was 9, one of my parents was incarcerated until I reached adulthood. And this was a national news story, so we had to learn as a family to try and escape the press to find some peace. Now, I can tell you, if you're from a smallish town and your parent commits a crime that becomes like a huge national story, you're not going to have a lot of friends or support, because not only do other children avoid you because of what they're hearing all over the news, but the parents, understandably so, want to protect their own children from you. Even as the years went by, kids would forget eventually, but inevitably some random substitute would be reading attendance, and when they came to my name would pause and look at me and ask out loud if I was related to the criminal so-and-so from a few years ago. So being a family member of a criminal of a story like that is inescapable. So I have a very unique perspective on true crime, being that 1, I was sort of a victim of my parents' actions, and 2, hounded by the media, and 3, actually on the side of the criminal too, because obviously I will always love my parent regardless of the crimes they committed, as is the case for most family members of criminals or alleged criminals like Kouri here. Her children will always have love for her, regardless of whether or not what she's accused of doing is true. Now, in the case with my incarcerated parent, mental illness was a huge part of what was going on. Sitting in court at 9 years old, seeing my parent in handcuffs. Of course, it was hard for me to even sit there still at 9 years old, but it was the first time I had heard the word psychosis. And as I researched more and more of these true crime cases, I'm seeing that a lot of the time there's usually a mental illness element tied with some sort of abuse or addiction. Many criminals who commit a series of similar crimes are abusive people, usually coming from a background or a history of abuse themselves. And these individuals do in fact later develop an addiction to sex, stealing, gambling, killing, assaulting, etc. Now, why is that? Why the obsession? Well, personally, when I think about it, I think it all comes down to an addiction with the thrill of control and power. Now, another huge reason I started this channel is because in more recent years, I have become a domestic violence advocate after my own adult experience with it. My own story is one for another time, but basically, once it was made clear to me by a relationship counselor that my partner was abusive, I could not unsee it anymore. And I realize it sounds ridiculous that I didn't know I was dealing with abuse, but I really didn't. I truly didn't realize that name-calling, berating, yelling, etc. is actually domestic violence that could literally affect DNA of my body and my children's DNA. I never realized there was scientific proof for these things. And I didn't realize that emotional abuse can literally change somebody's brain to the point where it's detectable on an MRI. And I really didn't know that it was destroying me. And I personally wanted to prevent my own children from both becoming abusers and enabling abuse. So I found the only way to do that is to research it and understand how it all begins. And soon after that, I realized that many of these true crime cases are absolutely riddled with abuse, which stems from someone who feels like they need to be in control. So I named this channel True Crime Matters because of the idea that true crime stories aren't just stories to be viewed for entertainment purposes. I mean, these stories really do matter. They are cautionary tales. And some of these stories wind up changing laws and changing the world. And many of these stories can actually help prevent future crimes. These stories can also bring a voice to the voiceless for the victims and the victims' families. Anyway, my personal rant aside, this case of Kouri Richins, if these claims of the state are actually true, this case has so many red flags of domestic violence against Eric. He apparently even warned his family that if anything happened to him, it was Kouri. And it's not hard to see why. You have the alleged financial abuse, her stealing money from his business without his knowledge. You have her taking control over his finances, taking control over that choice with the mansion that he didn't want to buy, taking out multiple life insurance policies on him without his knowledge, taking control over what food, drinks, or drugs he ingested. And ultimately, she took control over his actual life by taking it away from him, his family, and his friends. And then, what seemed like the final insult, as if all of that were not enough, exploiting his death by going on television to advertise a book she wrote, pretending that she was in shock over his death. But the real final insult will be her taking absolutely no accountability for any of that. People who aren't educated on domestic abuse seem to always ask the same questions. Why don't they just leave? And the answer, honestly, really isn't all that easy to explain. Because it's many reasons. While I wouldn't want to make assumptions for what the soul of Eric would want to tell us about his side of the story, I can tell you what other abuse victims say about why they don't leave. Most victims are worried about keeping the children protected, and I believe that Eric's lawyer said that he was most concerned about the safety of the kids and he wanted to keep things calm for the kids. And let me just tell you, family court is not the safest place to be when you're dealing with a controlling master manipulator who has money to burn. And a laid-back, quiet person afraid to speak up will not necessarily do very well in court with the judge. Oftentimes they come off to the judge as not believable, and they lose full custody of their children. Another big part is that victims are afraid to leave or be combative because they are afraid that the children or the victim will be met with even more abuse or harsher circumstances, which typically is what happens. So it's kind of the idea of not poking the bear, so to speak. So Eric wanted to keep things calm and status quo with the children could have played a very big part in why he didn't leave. Another big part of why victims don't leave is one that a lot of people don't think about, but it's actually addiction. And what I mean by that is a victim can actually become addicted to the highs and lows in the relationship, as trauma, again, is the root of many addictions. So after an extremely low period with the abuser, the victim will begin to crave a makeup session, wanting to be on the good side of the abuser again. And we have to remember that our bodies have very powerful hormones that arise in love relationships. And these hormones are pumping through us. Hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, and serotonin. And so leaving an abusive relationship can literally feel like withdrawal from a substance. Another reason why victims don't leave is because they're typically very empathetic people who don't really have it in their wheelhouse to think like a criminal master manipulator. Now, if you remember back to Eric's mom or sister who presented the prenup to Kouri the day before the wedding, maybe it's because Eric was just too empathetic and too kind of a person, and his family knew this, so they were trying to protect him because they knew he really wasn't all that great at protecting himself. And the final reason that I'll mention in this video as to why people don't leave is because the victim has actually been gaslit so much that they truly believe they are imagining how bad the situation is. So Eric could very well have been doubting this whole time that his wife Kouri really would go that far if the allegations are true. This really is such a tragic case to me, and it really made me wonder, what if Eric had confronted Kouri about any of these allegations? What if he felt like he could say, "Hey, did you put something in my drink?" Or, "Hey, did you just log into our insurance and make yourself primary beneficiary?" Or, "Hey, by the way, I've completely removed you from receiving any money in the case of my death." Would that information have changed anything? Or would it have just made things worse for him? Personally, I think if he would have let her know that he was worth nothing to her dead, that may have saved his life. But sadly, we'll never know. One of the biggest reasons why many of us fall victim to crime is that human beings, for the most part, never want to believe that bad things will happen to them. Many of us see these true crime stories off in the distance, and we just don't want to believe that it will actually happen to us. Victims especially don't want to believe that they will be killed by the person they love the most. And sadly, we see from so many of these stories, you never know when one day the victim will be you. I'm going to leave some links down below for a domestic violence hotline and website to help give some resources to anybody who needs them. And my heart truly does go out to you if you're experiencing or dealing with any form of abuse, either personally with yourself or with somebody you love. I'm also going to leave some information down below for addiction, because I also believe that addiction plays a big part in a lot of these crimes. So, what do you all think? Do you think that Kouri is really responsible for poisoning Eric? Or do you think it's just all a big misunderstanding and he just OD'd by accident? Do you think that Eric's allegations of Kouri trying to poison him in the past are actually true? Or do you think his family just made that part up to frame Kouri? Do you think there's any chance that Kouri is a victim herself? Or was she 100% the primary abuser? So that's all I have for you today, but I'll be sure to keep you posted on this case as we hear more. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching. Be careful out there.